Week 13 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 36 running backs. I'm ranking this week number 1, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. So McCaffrey, best running back easily this season in fantasy football. He could do it all, catch the football out of the backfield, have that home run hitting ability. And this week here, Philadelphia in a NFC Championship rematch from last year. I think Christian McCaffrey goes out there and has a big game. Number 2, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. Kamara, it's been a great season for him after he was suspended the first 3 games of the year, and he's been a PPR machine as Alvin Kamara. A lot of targets out of the backfield, in between the tackles, and pretty much he's only had one bad game all season. So this week in a potential shootout versus the Lions, where their defense has been leaky over the last few weeks, Alvin Kamara, I think, has a big game. Number 3, Austin Ekeler of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Austin Ekeler, I know the last few weeks the numbers have been down big time for Austin Ekeler, but this week a favorable matchup at the New England Patriots. And this team, they just got to get back to the basics a little bit, is this Los Angeles Charger team. And if Joshua Palmer could return to the lineup, it will help as well to open things up a little more. So Austin Ekeler, we know, is one of the better receiving backs in the league. And this week, I think he breaks out once again at New England. Number 4, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's been a great season for Etienne, no doubt about it. And he's an explosive running back. Him and Trevor Lawrence obviously played together in college, and they have a great rapport. And he pretty much has no competition all season over there, where he's the number 1 back, getting 85% of the touches. So this week on Monday Night Football, in a pretty decent matchup versus Cincinnati, I think Travis Etienne once again puts up a lead in numbers. Number 5, Raheem Mostert of the Miami Dolphins. So Raheem Mostert, he continues to go out there, and weekly, when you think he's not going to get the job done, he puts up numbers. And last week, a great game at the New York Jets, where he found the end zone twice. So this week, a great matchup once again in Washington. Mostert, he's had the knack for the end zone this season, and he's got breakaway speed still, even up there in the latter part of his career, especially at the running back position, where he's got a lot of miles and injuries on his body. So this week in the second half, I believe he'll be running out the clock in a game where Miami's going to be up early and often. Number 6, Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Rachaad White, the first month of the season, we didn't see much out of him, but the last 4 or 5 weeks, he's really putting up numbers and becoming one of the better PPR running backs in the league. So this week, a great matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that give up the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And pretty much his offense revolves around Mike Evans and Rachaad White. Number 7, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. So Breece Hall, we know he's an explosive back. He's got home run hitting ability. But the only downfall is obviously he doesn't have a quarterback that could stretch the field and open up the running game. And he plays behind the bad offensive line. But this week, in a grinded out type of performance with 2 similar teams going at it with the Falcons and the New York Jets, I think Breece Hall has one of his better games of the season this week. And this Jet team, it wouldn't be surprising if they won this game and Breece Hall explodes for a big one. Number 8, Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. So the last few weeks, Pollard's gotten back on track with 2 touchdowns, where he failed to score a touchdown besides week 1 going into week 11. So Tony Pollard, we know he's an explosive running back. Maybe it's taken him the whole season to get his legs under him after coming off a off-season ankle surgery. And this week versus the Seattle Seahawks, I think Pollard could go out there and make some plays. And he's in a great offense with one of the better offensive lines as well of the Dallas Cowboys, in a potential shootout on a Thursday night game, which is always high scoring. Number 9, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Bijan finally had that breakout and patented game in his rookie season last week, going over 120 total yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. So this week, a tougher matchup, no doubt about it, the New York Jets. But believe it or not, the Jets give up the 9th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And we saw last week Raheem Mostert break a big ball game versus the Jets, finding the end zone twice. So this week, even in a tougher matchup, I think Bijan Robinson, with his catching ability and him getting more touches, running the football in between the tackles, has a good game. Number 10, Kyren Williams of Los Angeles Rams. And he wasn't wasting any time, Kyren Williams, with a big ball game, fantasy points in PPR league. So this week, I know it's a tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, one of the better defenses in the league. But Kyren Williams, the workload's going to be there, obviously. That they cut. Henderson got sent back to the practice squad, and he just got a healthy workload and a big game. So even with workload and a tougher matchup, he's still a top 10 back. Number 11, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Ramondre Stevenson, he's been a great running back this season for the most part. And the only bright spot, to be honest, for this Patriot offense, besides maybe Mario Douglas and Hunter Henry for a few games. So this week here, middle of the pack matchup versus the Los Angeles Chargers coming to town. We know they have trouble stopping the run as the Chargers. We saw last week Lamar have a good game running and Keaton Mitchell. So this week here, Ramondre Stevenson, after coming off a nice game with 21 points in PPR leagues, once again is a good option. 12, Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry last week found the end zone twice. And Henry, I know he's not an elite running back like he once was, but still a solid number 2 running back to back in number 1 back for fantasy owners. So this week in a matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts, a team he's owned throughout his career, I think he goes out there once again and puts in a good performance. 13, Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Pacheco, it's been a great season running the football for him, and that's why this Chief offense, in terms of throwing the football, the numbers have gone down a lot, and also they don't really have any great receivers besides Rashee Rice and obviously Kelsey at the tight end position. So Pacheco, we know he runs the football like it's going to be his last carry each and every week, every carry, where he's one of the toughest runners in the game, and he'll look to run you over, and he looks for contact. So this week at Green Bay, Tundra might be on Sunday Night Football. I like Pacheco to get a lot of work in this one and put in a good game. Number 14, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. A Gibbs streak of games where he was putting up 20-plus fantasy points. But last week, he didn't have a good game, really. 11.30 fantasy points in PPR leagues. But this week, I think he gets back on track. Good matchup at the New Orleans Saints. We just saw Bijan Robinson carve him up for a big ball game, over 25 fantasy points. And Jahmyr Gibbs, we know he's a home run hitting type of running back. I know he's not going to get all the goal line looks and stuff, but still, it just takes 1 or 2 big plays for him to have a huge day. Number 15, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. So Robinson, he's been top 10 in fantasy points this season at the position. I know last week it was a pedestrian game for him versus a tough defense of the Dallas Cowboys, but this week I think he could find running lanes versus the Miami Dolphins, and he's been a better pass catcher out of the backfield than he has coming into the season. So Brian Robinson, a few weeks ago, he had a game over 100 yards receiving, and this week versus Miami, they're going to try to get the football to him because he's a playmaker and one of their better offensive players besides him and Terry McLaurin. 15, Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. So Javonte Williams, it's good to see he's healthy coming off the ACL injury last season. He's getting a good workload last week, 16 carries. I know they got Perine and Jaleel McLaughlin there over there, but they're more third down backs and passing down backs for the Denver Broncos. So this week, a good matchup with the Houston Texans. Where I think he could find running lanes is Javonte Williams. You know, he's getting all that goal line work. And this has a potential to be a mini shootout between these two teams. Number 17, Zach Moss of the Indianapolis Colts. Jonathan Taylor out 2 to 3 weeks now, getting thumb surgery. And we saw Zach Moss early in the season go for a big game, over 35 fantasy points in PPR leagues at this Tennessee Titan team. So Zach Moss, he's been one of the better backup running backs in the league. Him and Jonathan Taylor for the majority of the season since Taylor came back in week 4 were sharing carries. Then the last few weeks, Taylor took the backfield over after getting his legs on the room. But right now with Taylor out this week and Zach Moss in the mix for a big workload like we saw early in the season, he's definitely a running back on volume alone that should find his way into a good fantasy day. Number 18, Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So this is the highest I've had Harris on this list all season. And last week it was a solid game for Harris. He's still a short yardage back. I think Najee Harris is that great of a running back. Obviously, you don't have burst and you don't play behind a great offensive line, and not many people miss. But Najee Harris, he's been putting up numbers 4 out of 5 weeks now with double-digit fantasy points. And this week in a good matchup versus the Cardinals that give up the third most fantasy points to running backs. I have him having a good game. 19, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. Montgomery had a better game than Jahmyr Gibbs last week in the Thanksgiving loss versus the Green Bay Packers. And this week, I know it's a tougher matchup at the Saints, one of the better defenses in the league versus the run, but it's an indoor game, which is always a plus. David Montgomery and Gibbs, it's a nice 1-2 combo over there for this line team, and it seems like Gibbs is still the favorite for the majority of the goal line touches. If he could get 60 total yards and find the end zone, something along those lines, he's a solid number 2 running back. 20, Devin Singletary of the Houston Texans. So Devin Singletary, he's been the man now in the backfield over the last month of the season, where Pierce missed some games with injury. And the last week, I know pretty much it was a 50-50 split in terms of touches, but Singletary, the better receiving back out of the backfield. We saw some monster workloads the last 2 weeks before Pierce came back. This week with a great matchup versus the Broncos. They give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. I think Singletary has a good game once again, even with Pierce back in the lineup. 21, Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, everyone's stock went down with Joe Burrow out for the season. We saw last week Joe Mixon really didn't do much. And this week, it's a middle-of-the-pack matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars on Monday Night Football. So Joe Mixon, we know he's been a solid running back for many seasons, but right now with no Joe Burrow in there and teams pretty much loading up the box and trying to make Jake Browning beat them in the air, I think it's going to be tough sledding a little bit for Mixon this week. 22, Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns. He's been a nice replacement for Nick Chubb, who obviously tore the ACL early in the season, and pretty much you could pencil him in anywhere from 10 to 12 fantasy points minimum is Jerome Ford weekly. So this week in middle of the pack matchup at the Los Angeles Rams, it's a possibility in this game it could be Joe Flacco starting, which obviously isn't a good thing, where the Rams are going to force Flacco to try to beat him and shut down the run game. But at least Jerome Ford could catch the ball out of the backfield. He can make plays, and he's a home run type of hitter, running back as well, where we've seen that breakaway speed and put up some big gains. 23, DeAndre Swift of the Philadelphia Eagles. So this week a tough matchup, no doubt about it, for Swift and this Eagle team here versus one of the better defenses in the league against the run in the 49ers. I think this is going to be a pass-happy game once again for this Philadelphia Eagle team. We saw it last week where they were trailing early, came back, and then that game went to overtime and they beat the Buffalo Bills. And DeAndre Swift, he didn't do much in that one with 9.4 all fantasy points. So this week it wouldn't be surprising to me if we see a similar performance. 24 is Zach Charbonnet of the Seattle Seahawks. So once again, Kenneth Walker not going to play in this game on Thursday night at the Dallas Cowboys. And Zach Charbonnet, he didn't do much last week versus San Francisco 49ers in Week 12. So this week he's going to get to work again. DJ Dallas, he'll be mixed in a little bit. But Zach Charbonnet, physical running back, guy they took in the second round. And we'll see if he can have a bounce-back game. Like I said, last week was a pedestrian game for the most part, except in garbage time at the end of that game versus the 49ers. But this week at Dallas, there's one weakness about their defense. It is stopping the run, but we know Seattle's got to keep the game close for Charbonnet to have much value. 25, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jaylen Warren, he's been a decent running back once again this season. We know he's got more burst. We know he's a better receiver out of the backfield than Najee Harris. But Najee Harris, to be honest, I thought he would go away a little bit and not produce. But last season we saw it as well. Second half, Harris produced and Warren pretty much in a 50-50 split. So this week with a good matchup versus Arizona, I think Jaylen Warren still could go out there and make some plays. But I'm not having high hopes where his ceiling is pretty much capped. 26, James Conner of the Arizona Cardinals. So Conner, a matchup versus former team going back to Pittsburgh, and they're one of the better defenses in the league. Obviously, James Conner, the last few weeks since he returned from injury, the numbers haven't been all that great, but he's still a starting running back. He's still getting carries, and they still count on him in the passing game and running in between the tackles. So even in a ball game with a tough matchup, but you know the juices possibly are flowing at his former team, I think Conner still could be serviceable as a number 2 flex option. 27, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. Achane, he's an explosive running back, one of the quicker backs in the league, and fits this Mike McDaniel offense like a glove. But injuries have been a huge concern for him so far in his rookie season, missing 5 games with the knee. So last week he sat out. This week so far is a good chance he could play in this one. Been limited in practice, and it's a good matchup at the Commanders. So right now, this Miami Dolphin team, it's been a great season, and Achane, if he does play, hopefully he gets things going once again. I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit and keep him down here as a number 2 running back flex option. Number 28, A.J. Dillon of the Green Bay Packers. Been the back for the most part of the season this year for Green Bay. Aaron Jones been banged up all season with a hamstring injury and now the ankle knee injury. And this week a tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And A.J. Dillon, his ceiling really isn't high. I know he could catch some passes out of the backfield, but in between the tackles, yards per carry, he's a mid to poor running back in terms of that. So this week in a game where they're most likely trailing early and often and have to abandon the run, I don't expect much out of Dillon. 29, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So a decent matchup this week at division rival Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The offense, obviously, and everything is changing now with Frank Reich gone. And we'll see if Chuba Hubbard still will be a good part of this offense. Last week he had a nice game with Hubbard with 20 fantasy points in PPR league. So this week here at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a game that I believe could be close between these 2 division rivals. And this Panther team, they want to win at least a few games, obviously, to show that they could finish the season off well and maybe have a bright spot for Bryce Young after this year has been a mess. So right now, Chuba Hubbard, I still think he's going to get majority of the touches, even though Miles Sanders is there as well, and he got paid a pretty decent contract. Number 30, Samaje Perine of the Denver Broncos. So Samaje Perine, we know he's been a physical back throughout his career as a backup, But now he's been more of a passing downs back for the most part this season with this Denver Bronco team. So this week here, middle of the pack matchup with the Texans. We know he's fit in as the passing downs back and third down back with a few carries in between the tackles is Perine. But right now, Jaleel McLaughlin has been losing work over the last few weeks. And Perine, once again, has had that backup role. And he's had a role on this offense. 31, Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. So I think Kareem Hunt's best days are behind him, but he's still getting work with this Brown team. And if Joe Flacco's in there at quarterback, or even P.J. Walker, I believe this Cleveland Brown team, they're going to run the football and try to force run it. I know this week it's a decent matchup with the Los Angeles Rams, but when you have a quarterback that really can't stretch the field or move back there in the pocket and extend plays, it's going to be tough for them to produce throwing the football. So I think their best bet in this one at the Rams is running with Ford and Kareem Hunt. But like I said, Kareem Hunt really don't have a ceiling, and Ford's the way better back at this point. 32, Tyjae Spears of the Tennessee Titans. Tyjae Spears, he's been out-snapping Derrick Henry in some games, because we know the Tennessee Titan team, they've been struggling all season to score points, and they've been down early and often where they got no choice but to put Tyjae Spears in there and play catch up and throw the football a lot. So Tyjae Spears, the passing downs back, third down back. Obviously, Derrick Henry, he's lost a step, and his numbers definitely dropped off this season. And this week here, I could see it, though, be a grinded-out type of game with these two division rivals. So Spears, if you're in a deeper league and you need someone that could at least go out there and help a little bit in PPR formats, I think he could be a decent flex. Number 33, Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders. So Gibson, he's had some pop games over the last month of the season. Last week, I know he didn't do much, but that game was over as soon as that third quarter started. That Dallas Cowboy team took off and had a big game. But Antonio Gibson, we know he's a good receiver out of the backfield. He was a wide receiver in college, and this week versus Miami, we know they're going to be in a lot of passing formations, and most likely playing catch-up once again is Sam Howell in this Commander offense. So I think Gibson could get a lot of dump-offs, could line up as a receiver a little bit, and be a flex option as well. 34, Rico Dowdle of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dowdle, the last few weeks, he's been getting work and meaningful work as well. Last week, we saw him get a screen early in that game and find the end zone on a touchdown. He's a big physical back. I know the last few weeks, Tony Pollard's starting to get things going a little bit and putting up some fantasy points. But Rico Dowdle's still getting those 7 to 10 touch range. And even with minimum touches, he's been putting up some decent numbers for a guy in that role. So this week here, I know it's a middle of the pack matchup with the Seahawks coming to town, and this Cowboy offense has been a pass first offense now over the last few weeks here since Dak Prescott's really taken off and putting up huge numbers. Number 35, Miles Sanders of the Carolina Panthers. So we'll see in Sanders and Hubbard how much work both guys are going to get. Sanders, like I said earlier in the video, he got a nice contract in the offseason. I think with the new coaches, they're going to give Sanders a shot. And we've seen some flashes this season of Sanders showing he's still got some speed and burst and can make some plays. But right now, he's been a tough running back all season to trust. And coming into the year, I said he was going to be a bust at that ADP in the 5th, 6th round latest. So this week at Tampa Bay, I don't really think we'll see much from Sanders, but I think we will see at least 10, 12 touches. And the 36th and final running back I'm ranking this week here is Dameon Pierce of the Houston Texans. So coming into the year, Pierce, he was a solid 4th, 5th rounder in most fantasy drafts after coming off a nice rookie season last year, running over 900 yards. So this week, it's a good matchup on paper versus the Broncos. Give up the most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But right now, Dameon Pierce really hasn't done much this year besides 2 ball games. And Devin Singletary's been the better running back, and he fits the system better as well, in my opinion, as Singletary than Dameon Pierce. So right now, ration mode with injuries or bye weeks, you might have no choice but to play Pierce, but I don't expect much out of him. So that's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.